Turn the page. We'll come back to Mississippi State later, and certainly throughout the week as we move towards a big game on Saturday in Starkville with the Kentucky Wildcats coming to town. Vanderbilt was in Oxford on Saturday night to take on an Ole Miss team that walked in 6-1, and we talked all last week about what Ole Miss needed to do well, and the number one thing that Ole Miss needed to do well was start fast. And they started fast. Opening drive, 6 plays, 75 yards, minute 39, boom, 7-0. By the way, Ole Miss won the game 33-7. They led 26-0 at the half. But offense wasn't the story. Offense is part of the story. Is the offense bogged down at times?
A lot of times.
It missed on a bunch of passing plays where there were plays to be made. The offensive line at times looked really good and at times looked really bad. And Mitch Pettis is at the top of the list. Micah Pettis. Sorry, not Mitch. My apologies to Mitch Pettis wherever you are. Did not mean to insult you.
Old Mitch.
Micah Pettis was not particularly good. And the crazy, the like mind-bogglingly frustrating thing is that he's shown you that when he wants to be good, he can be. There's a lot of talent with Micah Pettis when he is fully engaged. That defensive line against Auburn last week was a lot better than the one that Ole Miss saw on Saturday night against Vanderbilt. Micah Pettis was good last week against Auburn. Yeah, Vanderbilt, who cares? We're going to win. Why do I need to get that block when I pull across the line? Boom. Loss of 2 in the backfield. Why do I need to pick up this blitzing linebacker? Boom, sack. Come on, man. You got to be better than that. That's just no bueno. And there are a lot of Ole Miss fans that were frustrated with a performance that resulted in covering a 25-point line, 24.5-point line, giving up 1 touchdown, being dominant defensively, and moving to 7-1 on the year.
You know what's crazy? That was Vanderbilt's worst loss of the season.
Yeah.
They've played Georgia. They've played Florida. That is their worst loss of the season. Isn't that weird? I mean, people are frustrated, mad, all this stuff, and yet that was the result. That was their worst offensive output of the season. I mean, it was only a 10-point game with Georgia in the fourth. Now, transitive property doesn't work and all that, but completely and totally dominant again for Pete Golding's defense. I know it's Vanderbilt. I know it's Arkansas, but they are doing things that you didn't expect them to do at this point, at least in August anyway.
Vanderbilt had a lead against Ole Miss a year ago at the half. Arkansas scored how many? 50?
A billion.
48, whatever the number was a year ago. Auburn scored more on Ole Miss a year ago, even though they lost that ball game. All right, what about the good? We'll do that next. So, taking a negative start to the conversation about Ole Miss Vanderbilt was probably a bad idea. And I didn't intend for it to be negative. It just kind of got there. Because Ole Miss did a lot of good, right? I think the negative part of it is after they got off to a really fast start, the game kind of got sluggish and kind of boring on the offensive side.
Would you agree that, I mean, I hate saying stuff like this because you can't quantify it. They gave up. But once they got a big lead, it did appear that they, coasted is the word that I'm going to keep using to the finish. They came out of the gate very clearly motivated, focused, locked in, executed, and then when they went up 26-0, I was like, all right, we're done here. You could kind of feel that with body language and things like that.
Yeah, I would agree. Really hard to quantify that.
It's hard to, but
they did not look nearly as crisp.
Yeah,
as they did at the outset. Jackson Dart goes 19 of 28 for 240 yards with a touchdown and an interception, and frankly, the interception was just a poorly thrown ball. It should have been a touchdown. He had a receiver wide open. He didn't get enough air under it. Safety came across, picked it off, had a nice return. That should have been a touchdown going the other way.
It does show you how much improvement.
Also should have had a touchdown pass to Hudson Wolf.
Yeah, that kid deserved that too, with battling through. I mean, back surgeries and years off, and then he comes back and then makes a great catch and breaks his collarbone and then comes back and you miss him. But isn't that funny, though? I mean, Jackson Dart, and I agree, he was not good on Saturday night. He looked, he threw a couple times off platform, missed the outside throws that he's been really good at, missed what should have been a couple of touchdown passes, and he was still 19 of 28 for 240.
Yeah. Sacked 3 times in the game.
Didn't protect him well.
To me, the guy there were 2 guys offensively that stole the show. Number 1 was number 4. Quinshon Judkins, 17 carries, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked slippery. He broke tackles, showed good acceleration. He ran well on the inside. He ran well on the outside. It was a really solid night. And Quinshon Judkins, don't look now, he's on pace for another 1,000-yard season. And if he pops in one of these next 4 games for one of those 180, 200-yard games, he could be on pace for 1,100 yards when it's all said and done. The other guy was Dayton Wade, who made one of the best catches that you will see this season in college football. He had 8 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. Trey Harris caught 6 balls. Jordan Watkins caught 3, and then it was a bunch of guys that had 1 catch. Ole Miss did what they were supposed to do, right? They went out and they dominated a bad team, and they got a win to go to 7-1. And the next 2 games are massive on the schedule. Texas A&M at home, Georgia on the road, then ULM, then the Egg Bowl.
Yeah.
You're 2/3 of the way through the season, and that's what's left.
That's the main takeaway from this game, right? I mean, we could break down like individual plays and stuff if we want to, but I think you said it. It's simple. They came out hot. They coasted to the finish. They covered a spread, and they got out of it healthy. Now, ideally, you wouldn't have had to play a bunch of guys that they played in the fourth quarter because Vanderbilt got that touchdown, and then you had to go back and score another one. And you didn't just completely run away from them to where Walker Howard could have played 2.5 quarters or whatever, but they came away from it healthy. I think it was, Anthony, it looked like he rolled his ankle or something, but came back in the game. Otherwise, nobody got hurt. Although Judkins trying to hurdle that guy in a game that you have in complete control. I said to my team, I said, all right, get him out. Get him out, Lane. No need for him to take another snap. But that's it. Now everything is so much more important now because, I mean, they are Texas A&M and Mississippi State in between going back to an Access Bowl. I mean, that's where they are right now. Georgia was impressive Saturday. I think that's a free shot. Going in there with the expectation to win, I think at this point is foolish. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but a loss there is not quote-unquote bad. Total free shot. But what happens over the next 4 weeks, if you get 3 wins in the next 4 weeks, you're going back to an Access Bowl. That's 28 regular season wins in 3 years. Only would have been bested by Alabama and Georgia in that stretch. It's program floor elevating type stuff is what that would be.
Hey, Dad, I got a question for you. And this is not like a gotcha or anything else. Like, I mean this genuinely. Your biggest question about Ole Miss going into the year and even through 4, 5, 6 games in the season was about the defense.
Yeah.
Have you seen enough? Yeah, like what is your – I know you've watched not every snap of every game that Ole Miss has played, but you've watched them enough. What is your impression of what they have become defensively?
They're good. That's a good defense. You know, they force turnovers. They get after the quarterback. They're sure tacklers. They're much better coached than they were a season ago. This is a good quality SEC defense.
And to me, it's the defensive line that stands out the most. They've just gotten a lot of pressure. Cedric Johnson had a sack. J.J. Pegues had a sack. Jared Ivey had 2.5 sacks. Stephon Wynn had half a sack. There's 5 sacks from that defensive line. 5 sacks, and not one of them came from a linebacker. All 5 of them went to defensive linemen in that game. And to me, that was the thing that stood out the most. Not that Vanderbilt's great or anywhere close to it. They got all kinds of issues at quarterback. I mean, they started Ken Seals in the game, and before the first half was over, they went to Walter Taylor, and he went the rest of the way.
He's a big dude, can run too. I mean, a lot of work, like with fundamentals throwing the football. His mechanics are all over the place, but he's big and he can run.
Yeah. Lefty, the ball comes out of his hand. It comes out of his hand nicely. Now, where it goes after it comes out of his hand, that's a different deal, but it spins nicely through the air. But Vanderbilt does have some weapons in the passing game. Junior Sherrill's a good player. Will Shepherd is a really good player. Ole Miss held him to 4 catches for 17 yards. That's a scheme problem, too. Vanderbilt's got to figure out a way to get Will Shepherd the ball more.
Yeah. He's an NFL player.
He is. He will be. He absolutely will be. Maybe had some success running the football, but nothing sustained. And Ole Miss gave up some yards. They gave up 169 on the ground, but only 60 through the air. I mean, that is the kind of defensive performance that a year ago you could, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you could have only dreamed of.
Yeah, and they're what
to have 229 yards allowed on 64 plays. That's silly.
And to do that for 4 quarters in a game like this, too, I think is impressive. It was something that we talked about a little bit this summer, but I think you're seeing the results of the talking point. This was a team that was heavily dependent on portal players to build this defense. They used the portal a lot, and it was a lot of late additions. But remember what we talked about with who they were? It wasn't like the one-year Texas A&M reject that they added all over this defense. It was a guy that played multiple years at Louisville, linebacker, multiple years at UCF at linebacker, 4 years at Alabama on the defensive line, 3 or 4 years at NC State on the defensive line, multiple years from James Madison on the defensive line, multiple years at Miami, and so on and so on. They added a bunch of guys that have played a lot of football. And so what you're seeing, I think, is the results of really good coaching, don't get me wrong. But that really good coaching is being done to players that are really experienced. How often do they make mistakes? Now, they're lacking in personnel in some spots on that defense for sure, but how often do they bust coverages? How often are they totally out of position? Teams have to work at it to beat them. I mean, even LSU, Daniels had to be perfect. I mean, he was perfect that night. So it's a seemingly a mature, experienced team that is always in the right spot, and they make the plays when they're there. They create havoc. They create turnovers. They're among the best in the country at both of those things. And I think it was a really nice mix of experienced portal players that came in and understood their role and are mature and are executing and playing really smart football.
Sports Talk, 601-879-4395. Ole Miss is an above-average team in a down SEC. If I am A&M, I absolutely expect to beat Ole Miss. Again, you only play your schedule, but what really good team has Ole Miss beat? Tulane? LSU, I guess. But there is a lot of parity right now. Well, which is it? Is it nobody's good, or is there a lot of parity? Because everybody's level of play has risen. For the record, and look, you can get off into metrics and you can find statistics to tell you whatever you want them to tell you. But Ole Miss currently has the number 5 strength of record in the entire country. What is strength of record? It is a formula that reflects the chance that an average top 25 team would have a team's record or better given the schedule. So, Ole Miss is number 5 in the strength of record category, 13 in the football power index, 11 in the AP poll, 10th in strength of schedule overall. Okay.
The ain't played nobody thing cannot possibly apply to them this year. I mean, this guy's telling us that LSU hasn't played anybody. Well, they beat Missouri on the road. Well, Missouri sucks. Well, Missouri's 7-1 with a win over Kansas State. I mean, talking in circles there.
Yeah. last year, the ain't played anybody at this point was a fair, valid criticism of Ole Miss. It is not this year. It is not this year.
And that's the thing about this A&M game is it's certainly losable. For all the thinly veiled shots at Jimbo Fisher Lane was taking today, he was not kidding when he was talking about the talent that they have amassed on that roster. There's an A&M fan in my Twitter mentions right now. Why is Lane so jealous of Jimbo? You are completely missing what he's jealous of.
The same one? Is it the same one?
No, I blocked that guy. He's done.
Oh. You found another one? How do you do this?
I don't know, but
look,
no,
when you make a mark that says Texas 8-4 in their font, you're on the radar. Hey, Dad.
Yeah, asking for it. Yeah.
It's Aggies Today, your number one source for anything Texas A&M football, with 25,000 followers. I'm like, guys, he's not jealous of Jimbo, you idiots. He's jealous of your money. That's what he said today. He used the phrase "collected the roster" like 10 times at his press conference today.
Hey, Dad, I don't know if you've watched it or seen the transcript, but he didn't refer to Texas A&M as recruiting players.
Nope.
Or buying players. He kept referring to them as collecting players.
But
that's what you do when you collect things that you don't use.
Yeah. And he said, whoever it is that's responsible for collecting all those players, they did a great job.
He hates. He thinks Jimbo is awful at coaching football because he's not kidding about the roster, though. That is a defensive line filled with NFL players. He said that John Garrison, the offensive line coach, he's going to not like the highlight cut-up that we give to him today in his team meeting. He's not going to like what A&M presents to his group because they're big, physical, nasty, deep. They're really good at wide receiver. I mean, a couple of NFL guys there, good enough at tight end. I mean, they can come to Ole Miss and win that game for sure. A&M's strength is something that has bothered Ole Miss, and it's protecting the passer. Now, on the flip side, they can't protect Max Johnson to save his life. I mean, he's going to get killed. South Carolina had great success pressuring the quarterback on Saturday. I mean, and Shane Beamer would sign the contract in blood to trade Ole Miss's defensive front for his. I mean, he pulled the knife out and cut his hand right there and signed it in his. I mean, South Carolina's bad there. So, but through all the joking and stuff and taking shots at Jimbo was a lot of truth. It's a very, very talented Texas A&M team that hasn't put it together because they're coached by Jimbo. But, man, the right Saturday, and they can beat you. They're talented enough to beat you.
So, when you look at A&M's schedule this year, they gave up 10 in a win to New Mexico. They gave up 48 in week 2 to Miami. And I watched what I could of that game from a hotel room in Syracuse. I really only watched the fourth quarter. I need to go back and watch that game and see how it is that Miami did what they did. They allowed 10 points against an anemic Auburn offense. Arkansas scored 22 on them. Alabama scored 26. Tennessee scored 20. South Carolina scored 17. So that defense outside of the Miami game is not giving up much. They're just not. They're giving up an average of what, about 20 points a game.
Rattler's been beaten up all season. I mean, his front's not good. He hasn't been protected all season. And even he was uncomfortable in that spot on. I mean, he had 3 in the first half, 3 intentional grounding penalties. He was terrified. And all season, he's looked comfortable being on the run most of the game, and he wasn't, man. I mean, they are. And Lane was asked about it today, about the familiarity with DJ Durkin, having coached under him and all that. He gave an interesting answer. He said what Ole Miss was doing offensively when Durkin was there, it's just not the same anymore. There's no more material advantage for Durkin being on the other sideline because even in just 2 years, what they do offensively is totally different.